I'm happy to have you today on the call, and thank you for participating as jury in our upcoming EM Kata. And I would be really happy to go with you through the case that we have and understand. Let's imagine if you would be an EM, how would you solve it? And maybe just before starting with that, can you also tell me whether you think it's relevant case? Did you solve those situations in your career?
Yeah, thanks, Alec. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be a participant and jury in this edition. So based on my experience, this case is extremely relevant. Both the scenario, like with the kind of company, the team setup, the kind of project that it is, the complications and the dependencies, these feel very realistic. We deal with these kinds of situations all the time. So really good case.
Thank you for that.
And if I were an EM, but with my current knowledge and experience, how would I solve this? Well, to me, it looks like the teams that are dependent on each other don't necessarily have the same priorities. So I would immediately identify that and try to push for an alignment in those priorities. Whether it's enough to do this with the EM of the upstream team, or whether I need to flag this to our director of engineering, would depend on the specifics of the situation. But I think it's a setup for failure if teams that depend on each other don't have the same business priorities, which seems to be the case here. Or maybe I'm misreading the case, but it looks like that's to me.
Yeah, it's open question whether it's the case or not. In reality, I would say it's most likely not, but
Okay.
it sounds like a good question to ask. So it sounds like first thing you would ask yourself, does those teams have the same business priorities or not?
Exactly. And then regardless of whether or not the priorities are the same, I would definitely look into ways that my team can own more of the solution. Like, it feels like my team is very dependent on another team. And when that happens, I don't believe that it's enough to just sit back and hope that the other team is going to come through. So, I would definitely look into ways to contingency plans. Like, could I onboard one of my developers into their stack? And likely, because it's different technologies here, Node and Go, but still sometimes it's possible. Could I have dedicated time from somebody on the upstream team to actually temporarily join my team as an enabler for my team? There are basically, my point is that, like, the ways you do this are up to you and dependent on the situation. But typically, I would feel more comfortable if my team could own more of the solution, right?
Yeah, so it sounds like you would like to be more autonomous or independent from the perspective of your team.
Yes, correct. I would also wonder if the boundaries are correct. I mean, like, I don't know the history of the company, but like maybe the bounded contexts actually are not the best ones. If this is a situation that happens all the time, maybe the upstream actually should be merged into my team. Maybe we should all be one team instead, because these are fairly small teams at 5 each. So I would also look at that, but that's more for the director of engineering, I think, perspective, not the EM.
Yeah. At the same time, I believe it's important for EMs to grow farther, to understand team topologies, everything that you said about bounded context and so on. Interesting. And you also said that, like you said so many things about dependency. I'm just wondering, how do you sense that there is a dependency between teams and it's already most probably will go for a failure?
Well, I mean, it depends on communication lines, and it depends on actually the architecture. So I think in this case, it's pretty clear that I need the services that other team is responsible for, and I need new functionality in these services. So that to me indicates that there's a very clear dependency. Now, I think it's also worthwhile in real life to ask, do I really need this dependency, right? Like, is the scope changeable? Like, could we go live without this functionality? Would we still be able to onboard merchants like we have to do? So I would definitely ask, how hard is the scope to begin with? Maybe there isn't a dependency. Maybe this is just a nice to have. I can't quite tell from the case, and sometimes that's true in reality.
So it sounds like the first thing the TM should need to do is to challenge the dependency in whatever way from different angles.
Yeah, because this whole conversation hinges on the assumption that dependency is real, but it
Hmm.
might not be. And then you
Yeah.
might be more autonomous than you think.
Yeah, so that's exactly the reason I created this kata, because what I observed many times, dependencies are not real, and people just creating them even if they're not there.
It happens a lot, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, like maybe you can just name, like if to summarize everything, like your experience and knowledge, are there key principles or approaches you were using to solve this case?
Um, yeah, I mean, in terms of principles or approaches, just one word, principles, I would say, alignment. Like, are we all agreeing on the scope of the project, and which would bring us to whether or not the dependency is
Hmm.
real, right? Are we all in agreement on the priorities? Is the launch in a new country really the first priority for all teams involved, which it should be. If it's not, something is maybe wrong. Communication, again, communicating about the priorities, communicating about the scopes, communicating also, what happens if my team fails, what happens if upstream fails, what happens if something else fails. I feel like there was no plan B here,
Hmm.
just a blind hope that the plan would
Yeah.
work out. There's also the principle, honestly, of influence, because I feel like the EM in the case was very. I'm not getting anything in the case about the EM being able to exert any influence in how another
Hmm.
operates, right? In reality, you want to be on really good terms with your peers. You want to be, your peers are your first team, right? You need to be able to call for help if you need and get that help. I'm not getting the EM here really getting any of that. And ownership, which brings us back to what we said earlier. Can you find ways that you or your team can be more responsible for your own fate and not wait on others to do it for you?
Yeah.
These four principles would be things that I would
Yeah.
always want to see, but in this case, they're sorely needed.
Yeah, so it sounds like like when you just mentioned them, I got impressions that mostly it was work outside of the team that's reporting to the EM rather than just working with the team who reports to the EM. What you just said about team one, so working closely with the team. Yeah. Thank you for that. And is there any other any books that you can recommend, or maybe some author with different books or articles that might be worth reading about it?
Yeah. Well, I think Sam Newman's microservices book is useful here just because we do have a team that is managing a few microservices, again, I feel like maybe the bounded contexts, like we said earlier, are an open question. Like, are they the
Hmm.
right contexts? Is it, maybe there's a service here that should be owned by my team in this case. Um, but also I would definitely recommend Team Topologies by
Hmm.
Manuel Page and Matthew Skelton, I think, which goes into the interplay of different teams and how they can enable each other, be streamlined, or be, all these different kinds of teams and interaction modes are really well captured in this book, which helps to set expectations and to operate the teams day to day. And honestly, I would also recommend How to Make Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's a
Hmm.
timeless
Nice.
classic in management. Like as an EM, you need to be able to make friends and influence people.
Indeed, indeed, that sounds good. Yeah, thank you for that, and looking forward to see you pretty soon on EM Kata as a part of the jury panel.
Thank you so much, Alec. My pleasure.
See you. Okay, let me stop recording.